Hello everybody, welcome to the Ultimate Scouting YouTube channel. Thank you guys so much for joining me here. We are looking at week 3 game picks here today. Really excited for this week. It's kind of a pivotal moment for a lot of NFL teams. It can kind of define where your season goes. So I'm really excited to look into this. There's some really exciting games this week. If you enjoy content like this, please like, subscribe, comment. All that stuff helps me out so much. I am hopefully going to be getting out some film reviews as well, in addition to the power rankings. If you haven't seen that video, go ahead and check it out. We'll do weekly game picks as well. So if you are interested in that kind of content, please follow along and I would really appreciate it. Diving into my game picks from last week here, I did not have a very fantastic week. I went 8-8 straight up, and then I went 6-10 against the spread. That brings my season totals to 17, 14, and 1 straight up, and 12 and 20 against the spread. Obviously, I'd like to improve on that. Not been my best start, but the beginning of the season was really hard. You kind of don't know where teams are at, and it's been a crazy season. There's been a lot of upsets, a lot of games that haven't gone the way that most people have thought. So it's been kind of a crazy season, but I'm excited to continue and look at all these different games and see if we can't get that bet record a little bit better there. So diving into our week 3 predictions here. On Thursday Night Football, we have the Cleveland Browns versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Browns are 5.5 point favorites. This seems like kind of a big spread to me. The Browns and Steelers both have pretty bad offenses. Mitch Trubisky really hasn't been able to get the Steelers offense unlocked at all. There's a lot of calls for Kenny Pickett to come in, and I do think that we see that eventually, but in this game, that clearly won't be the case, barring some kind of unforeseen circumstance. Jacoby Brissett really hasn't been able to lead the Browns to super high heights either. Nick Chubb and the run game has been going well, relatively speaking. The Steelers' defense hasn't been fantastic against the run, and ultimately I kind of think that's the difference here. I do think it's going to be pretty low scoring. I don't have a lot of faith in either offense too much. I think both defenses are really talented. It's a division matchup. This kind of just has all of the signs of being a close, competitive game. It's a little bit lower scoring. The AFC North also just tends to have games like this a lot. So I have 20-17, the Cleveland Browns winning here. That is technically the Steelers covering the spread though. So that is my pick here. Cleveland Browns picking up the win. Next up, we have the Chicago Bears hosting the Houston Texans. The Bears are 2.5 point favorites. It's pretty much just because they're at home, so this is pretty much a push game here. I had a lot of trouble with this one. The Bears have had ups and downs. They beat the 49ers week 1 in the pouring rain. It was kind of like, oh, maybe this team could be fun this year. And then they get beat down by the Packers on Sunday Night Football last week. It was pretty disappointing. They really haven't thrown the ball at all. The offense hasn't gotten unlocked. The defense has kind of limited points here and there, but the run defense has been horrible. And the Texans also have a terrible run defense. They've been a little bit better in the passing game. And Davis Mills has had some moments here and there as well. They played the Colts, who couldn't score points until the fourth quarter of that game. They ended up tying them there. And then they played the Broncos, and they kind of held them to pretty disappointing offensive performance as well. So I think this Texans defense has some fight. I think Lovie Smith is a good coach. Ultimately, I do think the Bears have a more talented roster, and with it being at home, I do think that they get the win here. 21-17 is my final score prediction. I do have them covering the spread. This one is not one I feel super duper confident on. I could see this Texans defense continuing to play well. The Bears offense really hasn't been good at all, so we'll be very interested to see. I do think this will be another lower scoring game here, but I do have the Bears picking this one up. Next up, we have the Tennessee Titans versus the Las Vegas Raiders. The Titans are 2.5 point home underdogs here. So Vegas certainly likes their hometown team here, the Raiders, being on the road in a game where both teams come in 0-2. It's going to be a really, really intense matchup because whoever loses this game, it becomes really, really tough to make the playoffs, especially in the AFC. And this is going to be a really tough contest. I was high on the Raiders coming into this season. They haven't quite lived up to expectations there, but barring a collapse they had last week against the Cardinals, they're 1-1 and looking pretty decent. So it's a tough spot to be in. The Titans got beat down on Monday Night Football versus the Bills. This is going to be a close one. I really think it will be. I do have the Raiders pulling this one out 27-23. I do have them covering that 2.5 point spread as well, winning by 4. I like the Raiders. I just think that with Carr, Adams, Renfro, Waller, all those guys, coached by Josh McDaniels, they're going to figure it out here eventually. And I think that this is kind of the get-right game. I've been lower on the Titans for a long time. It was a really, really bad loss to the Bills. So we'll kind of see what happens. I do pick the Raiders here in this one, though. Next up, we have the Colts at 6.5-point underdogs to the Kansas City Chiefs. This is a really, really tough spot to be in for the Colts. And, coming into this season, you probably expected to be 2-0, going in, hosting the Chiefs, and you feel really good about your chances. Now you sit at 0-1-1. You lost to the Jacksonville Jaguars last week, and not only that, you got shut out by the Jaguars, and then you tied the Texans after a really big comeback in the fourth quarter. They've only scored points in 2 of the 8 quarters that they've played this season. They have not looked good offensively. They can't get anything going in the red zone. I know they were missing Michael Pittman last week. He should be good to go this week. Hopefully that can elevate them, but I really just don't have a lot of confidence in this Colts team right now. I think they're kind of down. They're not in form right now. And you look at the Chiefs, they're cooking on all cylinders right now. They just beat their division rival, the Chargers. They're coming off of a longer week of rest. They've been looking good to start this season, and I really don't see that changing here. I have the Chiefs beating the Colts 34-24. I have them covering that 6.5-point spread as well. This is a rough start for the Colts if it does end up turning out this way. I do have the Chiefs winning this, though, and continuing to motor forward into 3-0. Next up, speaking of fantastic teams, we have the Dolphins at 5.5-point underdogs to the Buffalo Bills. The Bills have just been an absolute rampage so far. They steamrolled the Titans last week. They beat the Super Bowl champs week 1. Right now, they just don't look like they can be stopped, and so I'm continuing to roll with that. As well as the Dolphins played last week, the first half they looked really bad. Tua was just throwing straight to the defense. They really couldn't get anything going offensively. I like Mike McDaniel. I think he's done a really good job so far. Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle have been absolutely fantastic. I don't know that you can keep up with who I think is undisputably the best team in the NFL right now. And I have the Buffalo Bills winning this game 31-24, covering that spread as well versus their division opponent, the Dolphins. Next up, we have the Minnesota Vikings 6.5-point home favorites versus their division rival, the Detroit Lions. I think that this line's too big, personally. We're going to go ahead and dive into the analysis of it, but I have the Lions winning this game 28-27. Kind of a big upset here, according to Vegas. The Lions have ran the ball so well this season. They're averaging over 7 yards per carry so far in the first 2 games. That's unsustainable, but that's fantastic. DeAndre Swift has looked really good. The offensive line has blocked so hard for him. And I think that this Lions team, coming off a big win, they're just kind of revving to go. They're ready to play. And the Vikings just kind of got embarrassed on Monday Night Football against the Eagles. Kirk Cousins really didn't look good. I think that this is going to be a little bit higher scoring. Both teams can move the ball. They can be effective. But I actually do have the Lions winning this game. The Vikings have not been good defensively, especially in run defense. They're bottom 10 in run defense so far this season. The Lions have ran all over teams, and good teams at that. I mean, they came so close to beating the Eagles. Then they beat the Commanders. This Lions team is a team that I'm really excited about. I think they can continue to grow and develop and win some games, and this is one I believe in them. It is in Minnesota. It's going to be a tough task. I only have them winning by 1 point here, but I definitely expect them to be in this game, and I feel pretty decent about them covering this spread here. Next up, we have the New England Patriots versus the Baltimore Ravens. The Patriots are 3.5-point home underdogs here. I think that's about right. The Ravens had a ridiculous last-second loss to the Dolphins last week. You gave up 28 fourth-quarter points. That's not good at all. But, the first part of this game, the Ravens looked really good. Their offense was going really well. Lamar Jackson looks fantastic. On the other hand, the Patriots offense just looks abysmal so far. They've played the Dolphins. They've played the Steelers, who have a good defense as well. But they just cannot get the offense going at all. And the Ravens have a good defense as well. Though they kind of collapsed in the second part of the game last week, I think that they win this game pretty comfortably, 24-14. I just think that the Ravens are a far better team. I think that they, right now, are better offensively coached, which I don't even like Greg Roman, but it's better than Matt Patricia. So I believe in this team. I think that they are going to win this game and cover the spread as well. Next up, we have the New York Jets versus the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals are 4.5-point favorites here. Now, the Bengals have really got to win this game at this point. They sit at 0-2, the defending AFC champions, and this is a must-win game really for them. It's against Joe Flacco and the Jets. You're going into New York. I don't think they're panicking yet by any means. The offensive line has not looked good. You've got to get that offense going a bit. Now, I don't know that they get this offense really cooking. There's a lot of issues that they need to continue to work out. The communication just hasn't been good. Burrow is holding on to the ball too long, but he's also not reading defenses as effectively as he has. I think he's better once he kind of gets a grasp of what the defense is going to do. And that's kind of goes for the whole Bengals team. They start really slow and they're really good at adjustments, but it's just been too little too late so far. They've lost on last-second field goals in both of their games. I do think that they finally pick up a win here against the Jets. I've been winning 24-17. Now, this is kind of do or die for the Bengals, so it's a really big game for them. From the Jets' perspective, you come back, really emotional win versus the Browns. I think that could potentially propel you and build some momentum for you. Now, I don't know that Joe Flacco is going to have the kind of game that he did last week on a consistent basis, but you really love the development you see from Garrett Wilson, some of your young players as well. Breece Hall had a good game. So they're just continuing to kind of try to gel, figure things out until Zach Wilson returns. So there's certainly some stuff to build on. The Bengals just really, really need this game, and I am going to project them to win it here. Next up, we have the Washington Commanders versus the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles are 6.5-point road dogs here. I have them winning 28-20 versus the Commanders here. It's the Carson Wentz revenge game here. I don't think the Eagles are probably too terrified of Carson Wentz. This defense has played really, really well. Darius Slay absolutely locked up Justin Jefferson. The defensive front has looked good. The linebackers have looked really decent as well. The offense has looked fantastic. Jalen Hurts had one of his best games as a professional. A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, all the weapons seem to be locking in. The Eagles are one of my favorite teams. I think they are really hitting their stride already. And the Commanders, on the other hand, the defense really hasn't looked fantastic. The back end is looking really rough. You're just not getting the production that you need out of that defense that you've invested a lot of resources into. Offensively, Jahan Dotson is showing early returns. That's great. McLaurin, you know what you're getting with him. It's all about the consistency of Carson Wentz. You're going to have really high highs with this team and really low lows. I just don't foresee them beating this really good Eagles team here. I have the Eagles winning 28-20 and covering that spread. Next up, we have the Panthers versus the Saints. The Saints are 2.5-point road favorites here. I don't think that this line is big enough. Now, I know that the Saints had a really bad offensive performance last week. Jameis Winston didn't look good, and they really couldn't get a whole lot going versus the Buccaneers. I understand that, but the Buccaneers are probably a top 3 defense in the NFL right now. I think that's completely fair. And I think the Saints defense played fantastic until the fourth quarter when, Jameis kept giving the Buccaneers the ball. This defense is so good. The Panthers have not played well at all so far. You lose to the Browns and you lose to the Giants. Neither of those teams are, I think, fantastic this year. And this has not been a good start at all for the Panthers. Matt Rule has just been atrocious. I think he is easily going to be the first head coach fired. I think that this line should be much bigger. I certainly have the Saints winning this one here. 23-13. I have them covering easily in this game. This is probably my most confident pick here of the entire week. I just think the Saints are way too talented. I know the Panthers have some good playmakers. Christian McCaffrey, of course, DJ Moore. I don't even think Baker Mayfield's a bad quarterback. And they've got some nice pieces on defense as well. But the Saints, I think, are getting a little bit overhated by Vegas here just for losing to the Buccaneers, who are a really good team. And the Saints were in that game and winning for a good bit of that game. It was just kind of that fourth quarter collapse there that made the score way bigger than it actually was. It was a close game. So I foresee the Saints winning this one relatively easily, 23-13. All right, now we will look at the Los Angeles Chargers versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Chargers are 7.5-point home favorites here. This is a tough one. I think the Chargers are certainly going to win, but the Jaguars have been playing really well. You shut out the Indianapolis Colts. I think there's a little bit more of a problem with the Colts than wow, the Jaguars are fantastic, but I think the Jaguars have played really well so far. You lose to the Commanders week 1, but I think they put up a good fight. James Robinson's looked good. Trevor Lawrence has looked good. Christian Kirk has looked good. they've made some really nice additions, and they're seemingly paying off pretty well already. Now, the Chargers are one of the best teams in the league. I think that's safe to say. As long as Justin Herbert looks like himself, even playing through the injury, I think that they do win this game here. I just wasn't sure. 7.5 is kind of a big spread, but I do have them covering it here, 27-17. I think that this could definitely be a game that the Jaguars kind of backdoor cover, or they're in it a little bit before the Chargers break away. So I foresee the Jaguars being in this game, but I do think that the Chargers ultimately have too much talent. Justin Herbert's too good. They've got so many weapons, so many good players on that defensive line, in particular in that secondary, that they're just kind of going to overwhelm them eventually and get that win. Next up, we have the Cardinals versus the Rams. The Rams are 3.5-point road favorites here, and this is a close one. The Rams really haven't looked their best at this point so far. You get absolutely steamrolled by the Bills. That was a while ago. I'm not going to hold that against you too much. You come out of the gates and you beat up on the Falcons. But then you let them back into the game and they almost come back and win. That's absurd. Now, on the other hand, the Cardinals could just as easily be 0-2 as they are 1-1 right now. It took a miraculous comeback against the Raiders. You know, Kyler Murray had that crazy 2-point conversion. This is just like a really interesting game. I do have the Rams winning this 24-20 here. The Rams have been really, really good against the Cardinals historically under Sean McVay. They have kind of dominated this team. And while I do think that Kyler Murray has some really fantastic ability, he's going to need some help against a team that has so many stars. I mean, you go down the list, Aaron Donald, Jalen Ramsey on defense, and then you've got Stafford, Kupp, all those guys on offense as well. I think the Rams are able to kind of put things together a little bit offensively, and they are able to get this win against a division opponent. Next up, we have the Seattle Seahawks versus the Atlanta Falcons. The Seahawks are 1.5-point home favorites here. It's basically a push. This is two of the worst teams in the NFL going up against each other. It's going to be kind of interesting to just see where these teams are. The Seahawks do have that win against the Broncos in week 1. The Falcons almost came back against the Rams last week. They've been competitive in both games they've played. I think the Falcons do win this one 21-16. I just have a lot more confidence in Arthur Smith at this point. I think Pete Carroll was a really good coach. I think that he's done some great things. I just don't know that he's the cream of the crop anymore at this point. I think Arthur Smith has done a really good job utilizing his weapons besides Kyle Pitts. He needs to get Kyle Pitts more involved. I think he knows that. He's a smart guy. So I think that they've just been a little more competitive right now. And I know that I don't have them ranked high in my power rankings at all. I have them dead last. But they've been competitive. They need to continue to close out games. They need to add talent eventually once you're able to. But right now, I think that the rosters are pretty even in this matchup. I like Arthur Smith. I think the star power on the Falcons is a little bit better. You've got Kyle Pitts, you've got Drake London, you've got AJ Terrell on defense, you've got Grady Jarrett. You've got some nice pieces there. Cordarrelle Patterson as well is playing really well. For the Seahawks, I just don't trust Geno Smith to get the ball to DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. And defensively, I just don't believe in this Seattle team much at all. They're well coached. I don't know that they have the firepower to really be super competitive in a ton of games here. I do think that the Falcons win this game. Cordarrelle Patterson is probably going to have a big day as well. So I do have that one going for the Falcons. Next up, we have the Buccaneers versus the Packers. The Bucs are 2.5-point home favorites, basically a push at that point. This is going to be the game of the week here. Now, looking ahead at this matchup, the Buccaneers are going to be out a lot of pieces on offense. No Mike Evans. Chris Godwin's not going to be there. The offensive line continues to be really beat up. I'm a little worried for the Buccaneers in that regard. The Packers defense has a lot of talent. You look at Rashawn Gary, Kenny Clark, Jair Alexander, Devondre Campbell, Adrian Amos, Darnell Savage. All these players are really good. And, the Bucs have been fantastic offensively in the past, but we kind of saw it in the Saints game. Now you're missing Mike Evans too. There's just not a lot of players for Tom Brady to go to. And Tom Brady's a fantastic player. He's going to keep them in this game, no doubt about it. And the defense is fantastic for the Buccaneers. Like I mentioned before, they're a top 3 unit in the NFL. They've just got so many good players that I'm curious to see how this game goes, because the Packers offense isn't really that fantastic either. You've got Aaron Rodgers, you've got the running backs, Got some interesting pieces on the offensive line, depending on how healthy they are. The weapons are terrible. So it's kind of a strength on weakness for both teams. I think the defenses are really good in this game. The offenses, you've got a Hall of Fame level quarterback, but a lot of struggles as far as the surrounding cast right now for both of these teams. So I'll be really interested to see how this game goes. I am picking the Packers here 23-20. I'm just a bit concerned about the Buccaneers' weapons right now. I mean, you just don't have good players at all in there. And the same can be said for the Packers, but I just think Rodgers is a little more prepared for that at this point because, they've been going with Allen Lazard and Randall Cobb, Sammy Watkins all throughout camp. Tom Brady came into the season expecting Julio Jones, Russell Gage, Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, and pretty much none of them are available right now. Brashad Perryman and Scotty Miller should not be your 1 and 2 receivers right now. So I think that that's a little bit of a concern for the Buccaneers, and that's why I have the Packers winning this one in a tight one, 23-20. Next up, we have the Denver Broncos versus the San Francisco 49ers. This is the Sunday night football matchup here. The 49ers are 1.5-point road favorites. It's going to be a very close one according to Vegas. I have the 49ers winning this one 24-19. I think the 49ers have just been the better team. Even though they had that really bad loss to the Bears, I think there was more a product of the conditions. And now, as I've mentioned before, unfortunately, Trey Lance goes down with an injury, but I think Jimmy G gives them a higher floor right now. Now, the whole reason you were playing Lance is to get that ceiling that I don't think this team necessarily has anymore, but Jimmy G gives you that stability, he gives you that floor, and I think that they're going to be a really good team because that defense is so good. You've got so many good weapons. I just believe in the 49ers a lot. Now, on the Broncos side of things, they have not started the season hot at all. You lose to the Seahawks. You win against the Texans, but not very convincingly. Nathaniel Hackett hasn't looked good. Russ hasn't looked super locked in. The offense just hasn't gotten going at all. I think that this is a game that, it's just the 49ers are better. And I predict them to win this game. I've been a little bit lower on the Broncos than most of the general public has coming into the season, starting now, I think, as well. I'm just not sure that I believe in them 100% to be a true Super Bowl contender. And they've got a lot to fix if they want to reach that point. I think the 49ers are just closer to that. I think they get the win here in prime time, 24-19. As far as the Monday Night Football matchup goes, it's got a really interesting game here. It's the Giants versus the Cowboys. The Giants are actually favored. Who would have thought coming into week 3 that the Giants would be favored in this game? But no Dak Prescott. Cooper Rush did get the win versus the Bengals last week. He played relatively well. They relied a lot on the run game, but Rush played pretty decently. Now, on the other side, the Giants are 2-0, which nobody would have expected. Now you've beat the Panthers, who's not good at all, and then the Titans, who are not playing well right now. So they haven't beat the best teams in the NFL by any means, but they've still looked competitive with a really pretty poor roster, which I think is something to note. I think Brian Daboll is coaching them up really well. I do, however, have the Cowboys winning this game 23-16. I just think that ultimately the Giants are a less talented roster. Even with Cooper Rush in there for the Cowboys, I think that these teams are relatively equal at quarterback. I don't love Daniel Jones at all. And ultimately, I just trust the Cowboys to win this game more than the Giants. I like the Giants. I like Brian Daboll. I hope that they, continue to build off of the success that they've had already. I'm just not quite ready to crown them quite yet. I just have a little bit more faith in the Cowboys right now to win this game. So I have them winning 23-16 there. So that will go ahead and do it for my week 2 predictions. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much. If you do want to see more content like this, please subscribe, like this video, all of that, so you don't miss all of that good stuff in the future. Thank you for watching, guys. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks.